G'day guys, hope you're safe and well wherever you are. Recently I got to catch up with the one and only Charley Boorman from the Long Way series, Long Way Down, Long Way Round, but most recently Long Way Up. So we got to have a chat about some of the stuff that happened behind the scenes there, but also a bit more about Charley and his life in general. So just a quick warning, if you haven't watched the series, there's obviously going to be some spoilers, so I'd suggest waiting to watch this interview until after you watch it, but if not, enjoy. So, love the show, Charley. I thought it would be actually a bit depressing to watch a travel show during lockdown, but it was actually really refreshing to be reminded of the big wide world out there. Just want to, take us through what was Long Way Up and how's it all come about?
I think I don't know how many people sort of know me for out there, but I've I suppose people probably know me a little bit more for Long Way Round and Long Way Down than I did with Ewan McGregor over the years. And I think the first one was back in 2004. We went from London to New York via going east, so Kazakhstan, Mongolia, and Siberia, and Far East Russia. But and then we went down through Africa, and then now this one is Long Way Up, which is from the bottom of Argentina to Los Angeles. But I met Ewan. I was an actor before I did all of this, and my father is a film director, and he directed films like Deliverance and Excalibur and Hope and Glory and Emerald Forest and lots of movies in the sort of 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. He was a huge film director of that period, and he. So I was always chucked into his movies because we had 4 kids. My father would always say, "Oh, listen, don't bother hiring children. I've got 4 free children we can use for my movies." So we were sort of thrown into his movies because he was too cheap to employ a child actor. And so the first movie I was ever in was a film called Deliverance. I don't know if you ever saw it, but I wasn't the banjo player, just so people know. But and my father offered me a tricycle. He said, "Look, if you sit on that sofa with that bloke, I'll give you a tricycle." I know it sounds quite dodgy, but I really wanted that tricycle. Anyway, so I sat on the sofa, and it happened to be John Voight, who comes in at the end of the movie, and I suppose, and then I went on to make movies, and that's how I met Ewan. Was on a movie set, a film called The Serpent's Kiss, which was my big comeback movie. And my acting career was going down the toilet when I met Ewan, this film was with Pete Postlethwaite, Greta Scacchi, Richard E. Grant. It was big names, and I was thinking, right, I'm back in the movie industry. Anyway, that film was just absolute crap, and it went straight to DVD. So that was the last sort of legs of my acting career going off. But from that, I met Ewan on that movie set, and I remember meeting him, and I remember the first conversation we ever had together was he owned a Moto Guzzi Le Mans. And I went up to him. We met in some pub in the west coast of Ireland where we were making the movie, and we just started talking about motorbikes, and then that's pretty much all we've ever talked about for the last 25 years. Eventually, we came up with this idea of doing Long Way Round, and here we are now today talking about Long Way Up. I don't know, 14, 13 years later, and not quite sure where the bloody time has gone,
Yeah, well, I've got the facts here. So Long Way Around, 2004, actually. So 16 years since that came out. You've progressed.
All right, don't have to be so specific about the time. Yeah. Okay.
You progressed a long way from that tricycle, riding the bikes, and it was funny to see you on Long Way Up. That sort of lazy side straddle. You like you're having a bit of a cup of tea on the bike there as well. When you're celebrating at the end there.
Motorbikes has been involved in my life a bit like Ewan, and people ask me, why do you get involved in motorbikes? And you can ask the same question about people who ride horses or rock climbing or have some kind of passion about something. And I think it's something, I think my father was very adventurous when I was young, and he went around the world and made these movies in extremely difficult places, you know, in the South Pacific, in the late 60s, early 70s, and in the Brazilian jungle, and in South Carolina on a river, you know, and so he was very adventurous and loved travel. And I think that Ewan and I are both adventurous and both love to travel because of our work. You know, as working in the film industry, you'll travel all over the world to make movies, and it's a very kind of gypsy life. So we kind of got into that, and I suppose that, you know, both of us knocked around on motorbikes when, you know, from 6 or 7 years old. I was riding motorbikes, and so we both sort of did that, and it's a bit like if you have to take your driving license because you have to drive a car, but you choose to ride a motorcycle, and I think that's slightly the difference of where you come from. So you and I, you know, I mean, the long way around, or that whole series came about because we just wanted to have a bit of a longer ride, and hang out a bit more as mates, you know, and so. But what's interesting is we did the first two quite quickly, and then there was a long break in between, and quite a lot happened in between the second and the third one. You know, Ewan moved over to the States. We didn't really see so much of each other anymore because he was living in Los Angeles, I was living here. He would come back here to make a movie in the summer, but I was off making TV shows like Extreme Frontiers and By Any Means and the race and the Dakar Rally. And so we kept missing each other, and we just kind of were just floating along as friends. And then I had this huge crash in 2016, a massive crash where I destroyed my legs, and took about two years or so to learn to walk again. And funny enough, and actually, because we're talking about quad locks, but I had a quad lock on that crash, and it was the new Tiger 1200 is what it was, and we were doing this launch, and with all the press, the world's press were there. I think there was an Aussie press guy there that on the day that I crashed, and I totally destroyed the bike. I broke it into 3 pieces, and it took them 2 hours to find the rear wheel. The rear wheel had bounced down the road into someone's garden, and so. But the quad lock was absolutely fine. My bone was intact. So, you know, there's an endorsement, you know, of how good the project is. But
well, you really put it to the test. Like 30,000 miles.
I mean, that bike was absolutely destroyed. But and one of the Triumph guys came up to me and said, "Charlie, listen, I know I'm really sorry about your legs, but you know, but take solace that you are the first person in the world ever to destroy this model of a motorcycle."
Well, you wrote
so you know, so I've got that going for me, you know. So you and I then kind of sort of, you got the phone call, and he rang me back, and some guy answered and said, "Look, I'm really sorry, but Charlie's in having he's in the operating theatre." I was in there for, I think, 7 hours while they sort of put my legs back together, and there was a real moment where I was going to lose it, and then we sort of started talking to each other. And then 2 years later, and having just about started to walk again, I go and completely fuck myself up again in Australia. I mean, in South Africa. I do these motorcycle tours every year, and I take people through Africa. And I don't know what happened. I woke up 18 hours later, and I'd snapped my forearm and bent it backwards. All the bones came out, and collarbone, pelvis, and massive head injury. And that was when...
at the start. Sorry? And that footage at the start is really
Oh
confusing.
yeah, that's in the TV show. Yeah. No, it was awful. That was probably worse. It wasn't so debilitating because you know, when you break both your legs, it's very difficult to walk. But so I was flown back in. My wife had to fly out again to another country to pick me up and take me home. She was not happy, I can tell you. She was absolutely, you know, she's going, "What the lots of really bad words have you done to yourself again, Charlie? You know, I'm not impressed." I mean, I wasn't talking to either.
Yeah,
I think an elephant had walked out in front of me or something like that. I don't know, but then Ewan came to visit me here, and we sat and he came. I hadn't seen him we hadn't really hung out for such a long time, and I was stuck at home, so I wasn't going anywhere. He was over here making a movie. He came over to spend a couple of nights, and then ended up spending a month here, and that's when we started talking about doing a long way up. We'd always wanted to do one, and we started talking about it, and then we got Russ and Dave, who have done the trips with us on all the others, and we're saying how we'd really like to do something different with it this time, and Russ, who loves firsts, and he's always obsessed about record breaking and all this kind of stuff. He said, "Well, why don't we do it, electric?" And that was that's all those sort of things came together at that point. And then we said, "Oh, okay, well, that sounds like a great idea." I mean, had we known, we'd never have fucking gone electric. I tell you. I mean, it was that first few weeks of sitting on that electric bike was tough. It was really, really hard, and a huge sort of learning experience, and quite an incredible journey we took.
Incredible amount of planning to go into that as well. Like any kind of trip like this, you need a high level of planning. But when you're doing an electric like that as well, the facilities aren't always there for you. And
well, there were none. I mean, there were absolutely nothing in the whole of South and Central and Mexico. There is absolutely no infrastructure for charging vehicles whatsoever.
How do you plan this? And then who gets the final decision on where you go and all these things? Like, how does that even start?
Well, that's all with Ewan and I as to where we go and how we do it and stuff like that. And then Russ and Dave are brilliant, and they help us try and create what we want to do. But I mean, the first thing was to try and find the motorcycle, and right now, as we speak right now, there's an influx of electric cars, and just about every single company is chucking electric cars out at us right now, and that is 100% is going to be the future. And I'm driving an electric car at the moment. I mean, they're brilliant if you're living in urban around town, or you're not doing massive miles. Brilliant. But just a year ago, when we were talking to all the manufacturers, nobody was ready with anything, and there's only a couple of companies that really had something that was solid, and the people who really stood out were bizarrely to us was Harley Davidson. So when you say to people, "Oh, we're going to go right up through South America, and we're going to use electric motorcycles," and people go, "Electric motorcycles? How's that going to happen?" And you go, well, we're going to give it a go. And they go, "Well, who's making them?" You go, "Well, Harley Davidson." And they all look at you going, "What? Harley Davidson?"
Yeah.
But you imagine them as V-twin, big, noisy thumpers.
Yeah.
And then we're sitting on this Harley Davidson Livewire, which is the most incredible thing to ride. I mean, it's a naked sports bike, is what it is. I mean, it accelerates from 0 to 60 in 3 seconds. That acceleration between 40 and 80 miles an hour is blistering. I mean, I rode a Moto 2 a GP bike, with the new Triumph engine, and I couldn't believe that initial acceleration was just unbelievable, and then jumping on the Harley Livewire, it had that same feeling. When you accelerate really hard, you have to grip all your stomach muscles in order so that your stomach doesn't sort of slosh around because of the acceleration is so fast. So we're seeing these Harley Davidson, give them a go. And we say to them, "Look, we'd love to have some changes, to make it like an adventure bike." And they said, "Okay, whatever." And anyway, they came back a number of weeks later, and they came out with this bike that we used on long way up, and it was incredible. I mean, absolutely incredible. But we got down to Ushuaia, and we realized we'd only ridden them for about an hour, and never charged them, really. We sort of charged them once, but there were lots of people around us when we charged them the first time. So we had and that was with the fast charger, so we had no idea what to do. So we sat there
at the start.
Oh my God, it was just unbelievable.
Quite
And we sat
ironically,
there.
they sound like they should be in Star Wars as well. The sound they make.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it made that
Yeah.
kind of, and they have a heartbeat as well.
Yeah.
So when you're sitting still, what because they developed this bike over a period of about 6 years, and people at some stage were sitting at traffic lights, and because there's no noise and because people weren't used to it, people thought, oh, I think it's turned itself off, and then they would turn it off, and then the lights would go green, and there'd be nothing there. So what they developed was a thing was they call a heartbeat. So there's a heartbeat in the engine. It's really cool, and it's with the motor. The motor kind of does this little twitch like this, and it creates this do 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 do. So when you're sitting in the traffic lights and stuff like that, you can feel this heartbeat of the bike, and it's really nice. But so our learning curve that first couple of weeks, when you see on the TV show, it's just
You can see
we didn't know how to charge it. We had no chargers. There was no fast chargers at all. We had these 2 Rivian trucks that were electric that were coming with us. We got this energy company involved to create a whole charging grid the whole way. So they went ahead. They were starting to put charging points in South America. That's one of the big land grabs at the moment is who's going to own the charging grid, charging systems for cars and bikes, because that's the next petrol station.
Yeah.
And so this company said, look, we're putting them in anyway. So they put all this phase 2 charging in, which turns out that the Harley Davidsons don't use.
Oh, no.
So we had this amazing charging system that we couldn't use.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh! And then it was the worst winter in 30 years, and it was freezing cold, blizzards. We had to wait 5 days just for the snows to stop snowing, so we could get going. It was freezing cold, and the batteries don't like cold, so you don't go as far. And
you cover every sort of terrain. Like you're on ice at the start. There, there's mud in there. You're on the edge of cliffs, obviously tarmac. But then there's loose gravel. I think it's episode 6 where you're on that really loose gravel in Bolivia, and there's that moment where you're talking to yourself, like willing yourself to keep going and hold the bike.
Yeah.
It's petrifying. On that.
Bolivia was. I suppose Bolivia was our road of bones. I think we kind of sort of did the trip the opposite way around. So the trip was really difficult, and then very slowly it got easier and easier as we went along. And I think it's lucky, because if we'd gone the other way and had fast chargers in the States and then ended up in Central and South America with absolutely no charging, where you had to charge every night overnight, we'd have just gone mad, But one of the things about this trip was it was super interesting because we didn't know how this was going to play out, but basically what we had to do was we had to go to youth hostels or B&Bs or a hotel or during the day at a restaurant or someone's business, and say to them, look, do you mind if we plug in? And we thought it would be difficult. People would say, oh, I don't want you to use our electricity. And of course we would always pay for for the energy that we took. But what was incredibly surprising was that there was not a single person in the whole trip that said no. And don't forget, we sat in hotels and restaurants and people's houses and plunged them into darkness while we were charging our bikes and at stages. But what was really interesting is not only were we plugging into people's homes or businesses or lives, we were plugging into them as well, and so we were experiencing this trip in a completely different way. So when you plug in, you had time to be able to get to know people, to be able to see where they live, how they live, and that was super interesting, and that was a real bonus.
Yeah, you would have met some incredible people along the way, and
oh, we did. I mean, I remember one person talking about plugging in and meeting people, because these big trips, and any trip really is sure you can get from A to B no problem at all, but often it's what happens in between, and you don't remember the days where the good days when nothing happened or something like that. It's always the ones where you meet some extraordinary person, or you have a breakdown, or something goes wrong, or those are things that those memories you'll carry on forever. And
that really stands out to you?
Well, there was one time we gone to this hotel. We finally, I think we're in Argentina. No, we're in Chile, and we finally got to some kind of civilization, and we pulled into this quite kind of touristy town, and we needed a top up charge to get to where we wanted to go, and so we saw this really nice restaurant. I thought, let's just sit and have a just fantastic meal for a couple of hours while the bikes charged. So we tried to do, and every time we tried to charge the bikes in this restaurant, we kept plunging the kitchen into darkness. Or all the patrons were sitting having lunch and plunging them, and they never said no. They just kept trying to make it work, and they were turning the ovens off, and they were doing all sorts of stuff to try and make it happen for us. Anyway, it didn't work. So we went up and went to a campsite where they always have power, you know. Mm-hmm. So we plugged in. We met this amazing couple, and I think it's in episode 3 or something like that. I can't remember, but and we met this couple. They're from Europe. They were traveling, and we sat. We had lunch with them, and their story turned out to be just amazing. So he came from Eastern Europe, and he'd gone down through Turkey, met this girl in this small little village in Turkey. And she was a school teacher, and they kind of fell in love, and he had to move on. So he moved on, but then couldn't move on without her. So he went back to go and see her, and then she lives with a very traditional family, you know, in Turkey, and so she as a woman is expected to do certain things. So she just packed her bags, and she told her father that she got a job in Istanbul to teach in a school, and she's in Chile and having this most incredible time, living this amazing life with this person. And when she talks about her when you see it on the TV show, she talks about her boyfriend. You can see the love in her eyes, and it just shows you that no matter what no matter what what barriers there are in your life, if we should all be allowed to go and live your life how you want to live it, and that was a beautiful example of her coming from a very traditional background, and we were joking saying that if her father doesn't know that she's there, well, he does now.
Exactly.
So but in Chile he thinks she's in Istanbul. I mean, fantastic story. And they're so in love with each other. It was such a lovely story.
Other stories, like towards the end there, you're going through some sort of dangerous territory there, not just on the roads, but in terms of the other type of people you might meet. And so there's a bit of planning around how you would avoid cartels.
Yeah, I think always. I don't think people should worry too much. And we were a little bit worried going through Mexico because we had a lot of film equipment. We had a crew. We had Ewan McGregor with us, so we were worried that might attract a certain amount of people. But you've got to remember that you think about the thousands of people that travel through South America every year on buses, bikes, cars, walking, traveling, cycling, and same in Africa. And you never really hear any stories, really. You hear the odd story about someone was robbed or pickpocketed or whatever it is. I mean, and so that's fine. So I think on the whole, I think it's pretty safe, but you still have to take it all seriously. So, but I mean, we never really in this trip really never came across anything really that was. It was funny when we were in Honduras. We were. Did this UNICEF project where all these kids who work for the cartels and drug trafficking and people trafficking and sex trafficking and stuff, and they entice these children in to offer them, smartphones and Nike tennis shoes and designer clothes and stuff like that, and they get them to do things, and then they're trapped in there, and then they use and abuse them. And then if the child wants to get out for whatever reason, and realizes that drug muling isn't the right thing for them, these cartel will drag this kid into a room, and their parents will be in the same room, and if they're in some cases they've shot one of the parents in front of the child and say, look, if you don't do what we tell you, we're gonna shoot your other parent, and then we're going to carry on with your grandma and grandparents. And I mean, it's pretty vicious. And UNICEF are there to try and create an environment for these kids to be able to go to be like safe environments, so they can be kids rather than have to do the things that they've been told to do. So it's a huge issue and problem for that type of thing, but that is much more local and affects local people, not tourists. And so UNICEF were there to try and help clear up and make those villages and towns better. And it has improved unbelievably over the last 10 years. I mean, I was talking to one of these ex gang members, and we were talking about dangerous cities and stuff, and we were saying, well, I was saying, well, where are the most dangerous cities in the world? And he said, well, the top 5. He said 3 of them are in the United States of America, and then there's a couple in Europe. So Central and South America aren't so bad these days. And there's everyone, and that's what we've got to be careful of. The governments around the world, if people don't live how we do in the West and in Australia and stuff like that, we're very quick to criticize other countries in the way they live, and because they're slightly poorer or live differently or have different ideas, we're told that, well, that's wrong. Well, it's not really. It's just different, and it's not how we do it. So people should be left to do what they want, and then realize that actually some of the most dangerous places in the world are in the Western.
You obviously got through.
Are in the civilized world.
Yeah. Then you made it through to America. It must have been a real mix of emotions at the end there. Like, you can see you guys are so happy to finish the trip, but you've also just, it's the end of this incredible journey. So, I think 3,000 miles.
I think when we look back at the trip and we look at all the different, people say, well, what bit was the best? And you say, well, you can't really say what country or what bit was the best. It's just full of these amazing moments, like going through Bolivia in the desert. I mean, it was so difficult to ride those bikes in that deep gravelly sand, and unbelievable corrugation. I mean, you guys know what corrugation is like in Australia, that, and the outback, that pounding stuff. And Ewan and I have ridden and stuff in Africa, some terrible corrugation, but I've never in all my life, even having done the Dakar Rally and all that kind of stuff, never ridden corrugation like that. I mean, it was like 30 lanes wide. I mean, you'd be right on one side and going like this, and then you'd look over and you'd go, oh, it looks better over there. And you try and get over there, and it was just as bad over there, 30 lanes away. I mean, it was just unbelievable. And then, up into Machu Picchu, where the most amazing lost city in the top of the mountains, and riding down through. There was one bit where we're riding from 15,000 feet all the way down to sea level. It was like 4.5-5 hours of the most amazing, twisty, crazy road, following these beautiful valleys all the way down, and through southern Mexico, riding the bikes coming out of central into southern Mexico. Just one of the most stunning places I think I've ever been. And then finally, getting on the bus and having that adventure, and then finally getting across the border into America, and then suddenly it's all quite it's a bit like looking at your next door neighbor's pruned garden, and your garden is a complete mess, and you think, well, and then you go into this thing and everything works, and you think, wow, and then our first charge with a fast charger. It was it's a bit like someone sits down, and you plug the bike in, and it charges like really fast, like 35, 40 minutes to full. And it's a bit like someone, when someone sees a moving escalator for the first time, and they sit there going, oh my, wow, how does that work? And that's the feeling, was like, oh my God,
It's the
and then riding in and meeting friends, and especially my family, meeting with them again, and every trip that you do has a lifespan, and as Ewan says, it's a bit like a mini marriage. You get together and you're riding together and you're living together and you're making decisions together and you're annoyed together and you're frustrated together and all that kind of stuff. And these journeys have their lifespan. So by the time you get to the end of each one, a lot of part of you really knows that it's time to stop, but a bigger part of you doesn't want it to end. And so that's when you start talking about maybe doing another one, or you start thinking. So it means that when you stop the one you're on, it means it's okay to stop this one because I know we're going to do that one. And that's sort of where we got to when we were coming into LA.
So big question: is there going to be another one?
I think so. I hope so. And we spoke about doing Long Way Scandinavia or Long Way Down Under. We were thinking about as well. I mean, those two. I think certainly the Down Under one seems to be a pretty logical one. We're both still got hopefully got plenty of go in us. So I think I've had enough crashes for all of us put together. So hopefully we put that to bed.
Well, once again, you put the quad lock to the test. As I said, 13,000 miles, but also the crashes previously as well. And it's an incredible series. For those who haven't watched it, go out and see it now. Even if, as I said at the start, if you're a bit worried about watching a travel show during lockdown, don't be, because this will make you feel so much better. And,
well, I think it's very kind of you, kind words to say, and I think it's funny. This show, I think, more than all the others I've done, By Any Means and Extreme Frontiers and all those ones, and a couple of them I finished in Australia with. I think this one has I've had the most response from, and most people sort of ringing and saying, "Oh, I couldn't believe that," and I think because part of it is the adventure, but part of it is the technology that we're just about to go into. So the electric of it all, and at the beginning, before the show came out, there was a fair bit of negativity about, oh, we love that you're going on the strip, but electric, I'm not sure about that, and so luckily people have kind of embraced that a little bit more. But what would be really interesting, I was talking to someone the other day and I was saying, what would be really funny, we've got this WhatsApp with the team WhatsApp of the people who with Russ and Dave and everybody on it, and I was laughing because I was saying, what's quite funny is that we can be watching this program in 5 or 6 years time or 10 years time, and we can sit there and we can laugh at how old the electric technology will be because things will move on so fast.
The real groundbreakers in that. It's been great chatting with you, Charlie, and I'm looking forward to catching up further. But look, amazing series, and great to hear a little bit more about it behind the scenes. So thanks for joining us today.
Oh gosh, a real pleasure. Listen, thank you, and I love what you guys do at Quadlock. For years, I've been a big fan. So it's lovely to be part of a little small part of Quadlock.
As I said, the feeling is mutual. So great to be working with you. Thanks, Charlie. We'll chat soon.
Oh, that's a pleasure, mate. Thank you very much. Okay, well, have a good evening, and I'll speak to you soon.